glad that we have with us Mr. John Yates, who's a partner with Morris, Manning and Martin, and Dr. Jack Shade, a dear friend and philosopher and mentor for me, Charles H. Kelstad, Professor of Business, Emory University, and Mr. Greg King, who's Associate Vice President for Economic Development Institute Relations from Georgia Institute of Technology. So Greg, floor is yours, sir.
Well, the good thing is that we're all here together. I'm excited to be able to be here with Jag and John. I will maybe just add on a couple of things for both panelists. Jag, I read in your bio that you are actually the recipient of the 2020 Padma Bhushan Award for Literature and Education, which, as I understand it, it's the highest civilian award given by the government of India. So I wanted to highlight that, and the fact that you are both an advisor to numerous corporations all over the world in the fields of consumer behavior, relationship marketing, competitive strategy and analysis, but also have authored or co-authored more than 300 papers and numerous books on these topics as well. So very excited to have you here. And John, it's great to have you. And for those that don't know John, John is he is a leader in technology law. He's been practicing in this area for over 39 years, and his firm represents companies in all stages of growth. And they're a leader in venture capital, private equity deals, IPOs, and M&A. John's been quoted in a number of business publications and has written articles, both in the Wall Street Journal, Economist, and Atlanta Business Chronicle. Here regionally, John, I don't know that I knew this about you, having known you now for over a decade, but I didn't realize that you co-founded the Southeastern Software Association, TAG, and SIMDA. And so for those of us here in the Atlanta region, Virginia and Georgia and the Southeast, these have such big impacts. And so I wanted to call that out. And then probably one of the more fun things that I was familiar with, and I was excited to read that again in your bio, that John was also the chair of the 2013 NCAA Final Four basketball tournament held here in Atlanta. So that's one of those like really fun things of other duties as assigned, sounds like. Well, it's great to have you both here. This is an exciting topic, the future of technology. And so it's such a broad topic, and I know we've had the chance to chat a little bit about it, but maybe to start the conversation, Jag, if I could ask you maybe just to offer some comments on what you think about development and adoption of new technologies, impacts to global economies, or and even offering some comments about global technology hubs that come to mind for you. And then John, maybe from a regional standpoint, kind of the same question, but for our metro region in the broader Southeast. And we're increasingly known as a regional technology hub here in Atlanta. And so why do you think that is? So Jag, I'll kick that over to you first.
Thanks, Greg. Every technology has a major transformative impact, not just on the business, education, but the society at large. If you go back historically, the industrial age transformed us from the agricultural age, and we had a lot more automation, a lot more conveniences. Modern life as we know today would not have happened without great inventions, starting with the telephone, surprisingly, of course, with automobiles, and then television, etc. And I think that's going to be happening even much bigger scale as we look into the future in the digital technology. Key elements of digital technology that it is more accessible for those who want to be innovators, inventors, discoverers, and more accessible to those who want to consume or use the technology. That's the key one. Both the demand side and the supply side will have less constraints compared to the industrial age, capital constraints, infrastructure constraints, no matter how we look at it. And I'll articulate where we are going within the digital space over in the last maybe 25, 30 years. The first major change, or first major thing that the digital technology offered us is access. Access not locally alone or regionally, but globally. And the key transformation has been the internet. The internet has had a massive impact. It has a global reach. So communication-wise, what we thought was 6 degrees of separation, today it's no degrees of separation or 1 degree of separation. In fact, I can go on Google search engine today and find anything in the world, any information I need on a real time, updated, or Wikipedia for that matter on the other side. This was impossible at one time. So access to information and building the information highway has been very transformative on society. I think along with that one, we have to give credit not only to the cell phones, which are feature phones, but especially smartphones. Smartphones are mini computers. They have the storage and application capacity that we had not imagined. So in my hand, I can carry a device that is a multi-million dollar in many ways, but so affordable. It's a device which has more software embedded into the chips than ever before. It can do far more things than a large legacy systems. It is a mass. It's very similar to radios. Remember at one time we had vacuum tube radios, and then Sony came out with a transistor radio, portable, battery operated. So everybody can afford radio, even the rural population. So I think access is the first major phase we have experienced so far. And still we have longer to go because of the new infrastructure bill talks about universal internet access, whether it's on a mobile device or whether it's on a landline, however they do it. From access, we have gone to convenience. And it comes into several ways, but I'll talk about 3 things that are impacting our daily lives, generating demand, but also supply functions. One, of course, is e-commerce. Today, I can get products anywhere in the world, either using Amazon platform, for example, or Alibaba platforms, or whatever platforms are out there, market exchanges. We do have the shopping centers in the industrial age, the brick and mortar, but we never imagine I can reach a global bazaar in my hands, essentially. And I've done that thing. I've intentionally gone out of my way. We're great to see a specific Indian spice or an Indian product, I can get it on Amazon and it's available. They can deliver within 24 hours to 48 hours. Massive. So it's not just the Amazon itself, but Amazon is a market exchange. And there are many other market exchanges arising. Etsy, for example, for the craft and those people. Just goes on, we can explain Shopify, etc. So e-commerce is bringing a lot of changes where I don't have to go to the bazaar or the shopping center or a grocery store even. Grocery store comes to my house, which is a significant paradigm shift. Second major area which we talk about quite a lot is social media. The impact of social media, and they're borderless. Unlike other licenses, let's say television, radio, which are licensed by the government for the spectrum, even telephone is licensed. Social media are really borderless. They transcend jurisdictions. The largest nation today is no longer China and India with 1.2, 1.3 billion population, but it's a country called Facebook nation. 2 billion inhabitants. Think about that. Just on one platform. Then you combine WhatsApp, which they own, Instagram, which they own, for example. We're talking about 3 to 4 billion population, which behave like a community independent of a typical jurisdiction that we talk about, which is the government of the jurisdiction. And how it functions, we need to understand, is that the future of the society, the social media are so pervasive and everybody is engaged. So that's the social media is the second major area. And the third one is streaming services, which is just about starting. Netflix obviously started the program in many ways by going from physical delivery of videos by the companies like Blockbuster and basically delivering it by mail, but making it easier, but going online and now going streaming near the Disney World. So these are what we experience today. And if it's okay, Greg, I will take 2 more minutes to talk about where we are going. I think the next area is going to be from access, convenience to experience. And this is a phenomenal change. It basically makes a whole new technology to a next level, like a step function that I don't think we can even fully imagine unless maybe sometimes in science fiction movies. You know, like Minority Report is still my favorite movie 15 years ago. What they imagined, I think, is more real. Clearly, artificial intelligence is a driver. It's very scary technology, very positive on the one hand, but very scary. The second one is really more and more what surprisingly, very accurately, Facebook has articulated, which is metaverse. People will find living in a virtual community more exciting than in real world. Real world has issues, challenges, relationships have problems. In the virtual world, it's all like caves. So when the society becomes, when the artificial becomes real, how do we behave? I think that's a key change. We can debate, discuss that wrong. But there's a very key area that virtual communities are going to become known. In fact, we already have early stage, almost like legacy systems, two of them, Second Life. People who have gone to Second Life have figured out, like another life I want to lead, and Farmville. I find Farmville very fascinating, where you have this well-educated executive, typically in this case, there's a woman, rushing home so that she can actually milk the cow that she owns in a farm before sunset in that virtual world. That's how much we are involved. And in fact, I'm writing a book about this on the 7 side effects of the internet age. This is one of them, where people are finding virtual girlfriends, boyfriends, not just the matchmaking sites today that we have, but this is the next plateau, and they are very comfortable with that world. To me, that's a very interesting area. And the last comment about that, and other video games are moving the same way. They're becoming very experiential, a lot more than what we have, like a virtual reality. I can immerse into the game myself, become an actor if necessary. And the last comment is the one that I'm quite thinking about, which has to do with that we are living more and more like roommate families. We have no time to share together. We rush for the dinner as quickly as possible. And right after the dinner, very quickly, somebody's on YouTube, somebody's doing text messaging, somebody's watching television, somebody's talking on the phone, and etc. So we live like roommates. And what happens to family, which is a major institution? So these are the things we can discuss a little more. I took a little longer time, but I wanted to give you the global perspective, okay?
Well, there is so much to unpack here. This, I don't think we're going to have a part B and C to this discussion. I think so. There's a lot of exciting content here. John, thoughts from a regional perspective on the future of technology and the impact of with our regional economy and.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Sheth's comments are not only enlightening, they're very thought-provoking. The idea of being a member of the Facebook Nation is a bit scary, since I have no vote, I don't think, in the Facebook Nation, at least that I'm aware of, other than to unplug myself from that nation, which my wife won't let me do, but since she's the one that controls my Facebook page. But some items that I think may be getting to the granular level, because Jag did such a great job of giving the overall perspective and so many thought-provoking ideas. So what are we dealing with in Atlanta, and what are we dealing with in certain sections of the United States that are trying to elevate themselves to be more than regional leaders and more than national leaders, but to Jag's point, global leaders? And thanks to people like Dr. Sheth and like Ani and so many others in our community, and like Georgia Tech and what you're doing at Greg, I think our aspiration is to be a global player. Interestingly, in 1996, when we had the Olympics, that was probably the first time we put a flag on the map where people didn't confuse Atlanta with Atlantic City. And so people actually realized we had a city, we were growing, and that we were a diverse community. And I know the last panel talked about the importance of diversity as well. But I think what we're dealing with here is a situation where Atlanta has a lot of positive attributes, as do other sections of the country, whether that's Austin, whether that's Boston, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. But our advantages, I think, largely are, first of all, Georgia Tech. And it's so important to us that Georgia Tech and Emory University be recognized as global institutions. So our willingness to put money behind those schools In the case of tech, it's state money. In the case of Emory, it's largely private foundation money. But it's just critical because you look at other places in the country. Charlotte's a good example. Charlotte's a great city. It's my hometown. But the University of North Carolina at Charlotte is not considered a major engineering school or a major business school or a major institution, whereas Georgia Tech and Emory are here. So number one, we've got to support those educational institutions, and we can never lose track of the fact that they are central to what we're doing. I think the second area is the lack of concentration, which is actually a good thing for us in any one technology. You know, for example, you used to think about Minneapolis and say that's a medical device community, or San Diego, that's a biotech community. They have Biotech Beach. Well, that's great, except it limits the breadth of technology. And I think one thing we've had a real significant advantage in Atlanta and the region is we are more than just a single one-trick pony. We have technologies across the board. Now, we also have unicorns, but one of the areas that may be a little bit of weakness, we're more B2B focused. But I don't think Dr. Sheth or Greg or Ani or anybody else feels like that's a huge weakness because the B2B market is significant. Maybe you're not going to have as many unicorns, but it's still very significant. So, that's a key component. And I think the final point is we've got a couple areas where we just have a global presence already. And maybe the most significant one is the payments area. And it's a subset of fintech. But I was listening to a fund recently we have here in Atlanta that's a fintech fund, and they focus heavily on payments. And their point was everybody comes from all around the world to come to Atlanta to be focused on payments. So maybe one of the things we can do, to some of the points that Dr. Sheth raised, is to begin thinking about where are some other areas where we can begin focusing. And for others that are listening here that are in other communities where they may want to begin focusing to say, look, we have a presence here. How can we even go deeper into one particular area or another? And in the case of Atlanta, it's fintech and payments, but we also have healthcare, digital health. We also have e-commerce. We've got edtech, govtech. So a broad swath, which means if you're a technology engineer, if you're a student, if you're looking to find a business, you don't have to worry about job opportunities in the Atlanta area. And finally, you supplement that with our Fortune 100 headquarters that we have here, UPS, Home Depot, NCR, Delta Airlines, it just goes on and on. So there's great opportunity there. So things are very bright for the Atlanta area, I think for many other regions of the country. I think if I was in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, it wouldn't be that I would be fearing the immediate future, but I would wonder about the long-term future, especially when you see what's happening in places like Atlanta.
And John, those are great points. And as I was thinking about both of your comments, maybe some follow-on questions to that. Jag, you were when you were talking about sort of the explosion in the digital world and all of the things that happened to that. There was a colleague of mine that was over at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and she shared a quote from one of the panelists looking at creating in a panel around creating innovation hubs. And one of the panelists said that cities will be transformed by leveraging technology to solve problems and create a new economy. Then they further went on and talked about things like the physical internet, drones, autonomy, unmanned systems would actually illuminate this whole new world. But I was struck by the term "new economy." That was when we were first in the 90s, when we were beginning to hear more about the use of the internet for business. The talk about new economy was being heard everywhere. But it seems like that the future of that, if we went back into the 90s, the future of technology would be able to realize greater efficiencies and greater access, which is just what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then,
you're so right. In fact, just to add to what John mentioned, Atlanta is definitely becoming more and more global hub city. Because again, for the same reasons, the technology enables us to do that now. It has very right ingredients. It has all the right ingredients pretty much. And I'll articulate areas where I think Atlanta will become a global hub city. The first area out of nowhere is automobile industry. It is going to definitely replace Detroit. Detroit incumbents won't be able to do it like General Motors or Ford or Chrysler, Fiat, but I think it is the foreign manufacturers who are finding in the southeast, Atlanta is the city and nearby all the plants, whether it's in Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, etc., including Georgia. So automobile industry is shifting enormously, not only going from the typical gasoline-driven, the typical engine transmission to more and more obviously becoming electric. And the 5 German car makers are all here in terms of virtual headquarters in their mind. Koreans are here now. It's a matter of time before everybody will come, and then you become an assembler. Immediately all the suppliers have to come nearby. Now, why Atlanta? Because automobile is no longer the traditional mechanical thing that we know. But automobile today is nothing more, nothing less than a large-scale, livable, driving Apple iPhone or Android iPhone. It is all software technology, and it is all, in fact, basically embedded into the car. So we are moving to the digital age of the automobile industry from electromechanical, which requires a talent, which requires universities. And as the previous speaker talked about from NSF, strong vocational technical education, which is a new economy in many ways. Your wages go up. So Atlanta basically can aspire to go from a low-wage city or an economy to a high-wage economy very quickly, surprisingly, with several multipliers. FinTech comes out very clearly. But I think also along with FinTech is the digital media. Similar to the auto industry, the movie-making industry is all digital now. There's no longer Kodak films with which they used to make movies. Today, it's all made by digital cameras with maybe the Mac architecture of Apple on the one end or Sony platforms, etc. This is becoming a concentration for movie industry. That includes television programs, etc. And we do everything, pre-production, production and post-production. It is an industry where already, because of the tax incentives, has congregated, just make it global. Each one of these, if you think about making global what we do right now, it's very doable because there are only a few capitals in the world to make automobiles. And one can hand them and think about very few capitals in the world that make movie, etc., city by city. And we can easily identify it. I definitely agree with the previous speaker. He pointed out for us, which is so true, which is health IT services. IT services generally, all professional services are becoming IT in digital transformation. We have the largest pool of people. And the nice thing about Atlanta is that we attract students from all over the world, not only from the country, and they want to live in Atlanta. Young people find Atlanta is a pretty nice city, affordable, friendly, multicultural in many ways, feel very comfortable. And of course, we have a civil rights legacy here. So predominantly, historically Black colleges and universities, which again, previous speaker talked about, we already have the presence here. One can leverage in terms of diversity, but also foreign university or foreign national diversity, not just our diversity within the country. And that's very exciting to me also. So I think health is very key with CDC, Emory University, Georgia Tech bioengineering program. I can articulate. And we want to make sure that we don't forget that Atlanta has 5 major universities and about a dozen second-tier universities. It's pretty massive. It's like Boston in many ways. Everybody thinks about Boston. They think about that here, but we have to leverage that. So my recommendation is that either 5 universities presidents get together and think about how to globalize Atlanta as a major global hub city. We can do it like Olympics. We did it before. It can be led by an independent person or an entity, not by the Chamber of Commerce, not by the City Council of the state of Georgia, because each one has their own stakeholders, which will pull in different directions. So you need an autonomous individual or an entity, which can be done. A good retired president of a university who is very well respected in the community can take a lead, as we did with Olympics, for example. I think something like that can be done. I do want to add one more thing. I'm sorry to take a little more time again. But Atlanta, if you go back to the history, was called Terminus. It was the junction of two railroads. It had a huge location advantage. I think it's the same thing today. I don't need to attract all of the foreign headquarters to locate. Typically, they will have a Northern Hemisphere, North America, housed in Toronto or in New York. They will have a Southern Hemisphere, either in Miami, Florida, or in Panama country. Today, given the technology and the infrastructure, Atlanta can become the single location to manage all of Western Hemisphere. Corporations are very much not wanting to create too many headquarters. Efficiency, as you talked about, Greg, economies of scale. And with the industry, I'm not about the flying wise, Savannah Airport becomes very strategic. You see the clogging taking place on the West Coast right now between Los Angeles and Long Beach Harbor, for example. Similar clogging in Miami, surprisingly, as well as in Northeast, say, Port Elizabeth. I think we have a great opportunity here again to bring the traffic through the Suez Canal on the east side. And there's a reverse cargo we can offer, unlike in California. There are no empty containers. I think we can do a major job. So I see an enormous potential for Atlanta to become a global hub city for foreign companies headquartering here with a single Western Hemisphere headquarters. Again, I'm sorry, I took it too long to articulate.
No, not at all. Actually, John, building on some of Jack's comments, John, you mentioned that there's not maybe a singular focus on a particular technology. And if you look at areas where Georgia or Atlanta leads, it's multifaceted, right? So you would have digital media, you'd have logistics, you'd have fintech or payments, you would have health IT and some others. And increasingly, we're getting recognized for some of those additional activities as well. But some common features of that is that they are made better and they're amplified by digital structure. We've seen more companies come in and where they're blending, where companies, whether you're, regardless of industry, will say that they want to be an AI first organization, or everybody knows the importance of data, but also the importance of keeping that data secure and private. John, maybe offer some comments. I think one of the things that I know that you've talked about with Venture Atlanta and seeing some of the startups that have come into this space that represent both unique technologies, but also those solutions that converge technologies as well.
Yeah, let me comment on the first part of what you're mentioning, Greg, because I think it's quite interesting. The pandemic has created a little, more than a little, a big, unique opportunity for Atlanta. And I want to highlight this because I think it's very interesting. We're already seeing the results of it. More and more companies are comfortable with the idea of their workforce living away from the headquarters, the mothership. And Atlanta is going to be a beneficiary of that. We have, and as will some other cities in the United States, basically the cities where there's a lower cost of living. And the digital world that Jag talks about, all you have to do is have your phone, you got your computer, it's getting more sophisticated all the time. You don't have any idea where I am right now. I got a virtual background. I'm in my office, but I could be at the beach because I would have a phone that would filter out the waves in the background. And you might not even know that I have a swimsuit on under my sweater, which I don't. But so what you're seeing is an environment where I think more and more people are saying, look, we don't have to be in California. We don't have to be wherever we can be in a nice, comfortable city. And Atlanta is a good example of that. And frankly, if you've been recently in San Francisco or Los Angeles or some other cities, it's not as comfortable living there as it used to be. And a lot more people, no offense to those cities, I think they're wonderful. They got a lot more problems than we have in Atlanta. And so it's going to be very interesting in this hybrid workforce as part of the global componentry of what we're talking about here. So not only can companies think about, offshore development, activities going on globally outside the United States, but, you could live in, South Dakota pretty inexpensively, and nobody's going to know whether you're in South Dakota or whether you're in New York City. Now, on the technology side of things, I think one of the things that we've got going for us in Atlanta, and I think it's also in some other cities as well, is the fact that it's not, we're not so isolated in one particular technology. I would say that the point that Jag raised, which is an interesting one, is, not necessarily for the city council or chamber of commerce or somebody else to say, we're going to go off in this direction or that direction in technology. And I would agree with that, because there's a lot of talk there, politicians or, community leaders. But one thing I do think we need to have is to have the community leaders, the city council, the governor and others, and very importantly, the business community that supports a concept. And maybe the best example of that, and I think Jag, you and Greg would agree to this, and Ani as well as Atlantans, was the Olympics. I mean, we had Billy Payne, who was not a politician. He was a former football player at University of Georgia and a successful businessman, and Andy Young, who was a politician, but you could say more, and he had been mayor, but at the time, he was, I think, a private citizen who took an initiative and ran with it. And maybe one of the great opportunities for us and for other cities, for people that are listening here that are in another community, is to think, look, how do we take an area or a concept, or maybe it's an event, maybe it's not the Olympics, maybe it's another event, and say, we're going to focus on this event, and it's a big, hairy, audacious thing that we're going to go after, but we're going to try to get it to our community. In our case in Atlanta with the Olympics, there's no reason why we can't think of other events we could bring here. And it's not South by Southwest, which I think is great, but that's evolved into its own little thing. It's something going to be different. So I'd like to see us think about that, bringing these various communities together, take the technologies together, and then see us catapult our community in that regard.
John, I like that you referenced Jim Collins in that thing. So I'll add to that. And what I see here is the flywheel effect that they mentioned, right? So when you think about university research, you think about the business community, think about things like the Olympics and some of the elements that you're talking about. It's those movements that by themselves may not seem like they're the big movement, but enough of those movements continue to advance. And it's not one thing, it's many things that ended up creating this flywheel effect, or this multiplier that keeps momentum going. You're seeing that really in many places here in Atlanta. I mean, I think, when you think about fintech, when you think about some of the automotive technologies, the road to that has been paved here in Atlanta and Georgia through investments that every university has made, that Georgia Tech and the university system has made, and that the state has made, and the investments of time, with community leaders going back decades. I do think one of the interesting developments here has been, and Jack, you mentioned this, was digital media and creative media. Here in Atlanta. Atlanta, if you're watching television or a movie, at the end of that, you see a Georgia peach on the back of that, you know that it has been filmed or produced in some way here in Georgia, and it's been part of that. That's a whole new set of technology talent opportunities, as well as from the post-production side, it brings in all those digital and creative opportunities as well. Any comments from either of you on some of those aspects?
John, go ahead.
Well, I think if on the international side of things, one of the areas that I think we are probably lacking more than anything is really when you look at certain componentry of biotech and life sciences in particular. And when I think about what's missing in our community, and it's really very isolated in just a couple areas, it's that. And so when people ask me about, the international global technologies and where should we spend more time and energy. I think we talk a lot about life science and biotech, but we haven't done much in those areas. And I don't know whether those are areas that we should pursue, but it's one of those voids when you think about a pie chart. There's a slice there that just pulled out. Now, I know we talk a lot about it, but we think about companies that we've been able to spawn, which is the way I measure a lot of the success for a community. It's not just do they have a course, or do they have a building at a university, or do they have professors in that area. No offense, Dr. Schetz, excellent professors, but they really spawned businesses and innovation coming out of there. And that's an area that I guess I worry a little bit about, because I think a lot of the funds look for that. The other thing is, internationally, I think a lot of companies that are, you look at other international cities, many of them have sources of capital that are much more organized than what we have in Atlanta or in other places here. So, Jack, maybe you can comment somewhat on that too, because you see a lot of that, and the shortcomings of maybe some of the things that we've done that haven't been as globally oriented as it could be.
I think, John, you're absolutely right on both points. Biological sciences is the science of this new millennium. As we shift from mechanical physics and chemistry primarily, which was the last century, we are definitely shifting to our biological sciences. Computers will behave as if they are brains, learn quite a lot from the biological sciences. All of the old hardware, basically, and maybe software will come more from. And then cloning is pretty much here. We know how to clone everything practically, not just the fish or the little fishes. We can clone a sheep, we can clone any animal, we can clone humans even. It's pretty much there. Its use, utilization, commercialization would be, we'll have to discuss a bit. But we do have a shortage of supply. Surprisingly, as the world population grows, how do we grow food, security, etc.? So I do see biological sciences moving much faster, much bigger, and we have the genesis to make this into a hub. Boston is already a biotech city. San Diego is the next one, but the third one is Winston-Salem. Out of nowhere, the government, the university invested over there and created a biotech excitement. Here we have a much better scale, so I totally agree on that point. And I also agree on your second point, namely that I think Atlanta needs capital. We have a lot of things. First of all, Suresh Sharma, who works with me quite a lot also, I find that people are not even aware of what we do. There's a key problem of awareness. Atlanta does not come in the minds of people when you talk about venture capital as the Silicon Valley, the company. So how can we motivate to have here a campaign to say we have capabilities, we have generated good companies from here, even including Unicorn, and it's possible, or attract from foreign countries, make this into a VC capital. I'm more likely, I'm advocating a little more, not VC capital as much as advocating, for example, private equity. Private equity is the next growth engine, whether it's ESG funds, for example, environmental sustainability governance funds. In fact, I'm told that New Zealand is already having their office here with something like a $4 billion ESG fund, which they will ramp up to $25 billion, looking for opportunities to invest. And I think private equity is the place where I think it's wide open right now. Wide open.
I wanted to, well, I apologize, Ani. I want to do a time check. Are we still concluding at 25 after?
Well, you started a bit late, so how about we say you have 7 minutes?
Wonderful. Okay. So wanted to make sure if there were questions from the chat. One of the questions that's here in the chat is, how do we attract business and investors? It says Tennessee leads us as a business-friendly state. It says tax reform is a good start, don't you think? So that's the question from David.
John, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. I think it is important to attract investors. There's two parts to this question. One is you attract investors who then want to open an office in your city or location. The second is you attract investors to come in and make investments and maybe fly home at night, tuck their kids in. I don't think that the world is going to require that an investor live in your community. It's nice when they do, but it's not a must-have. And so what we're finding more and more of, and I would agree with Jag particularly about this notion of private equity, because the private equity funds are scarce in Atlanta and the Southeast. But we're going to do 300 plus tech financings this year, and half of them with private equity funds. And our biggest clients are out of California. So many of these funds now say, look, we don't want to go invest in Boston, Silicon Valley, New York, Chicago. We want to come to Atlanta and the Southeast, whether that's Tennessee or elsewhere. Now, Atlanta has the benefit. You got to go through Atlanta to get to most places in Tennessee. No offense to Tennessee, it's a fine state. But we have the huge advantage that people are coming in here. And so, how do we attract more talent here and more money here? It's by building more companies that are here. And I will tell you right now that I've never seen as many funds wanting to meet with companies in Atlanta and the Southeast than I'm seeing now. I mean, these funds have enormous amounts of money. Even if the stock market were to take a huge dive, it's very different from the late 90s where everybody was taking their company public. Now, and there are public activities and there are SPAC activities, but these funds have so much money, they've got to deploy it. So I think Atlanta, Georgia, tax reform would be great. Other incentives would be great, but I don't think we have to provide those. I think what we need to do is continue to grow and spawn good companies, support the institutions, and do several of the things that Dr. Sheth was talking about too, to plant even a deeper flag in certain technology areas.
The other, Craig, just to amplify a little more on John's comment, Atlanta has many of the support backbone infrastructure things, especially legal services. We have a significant number of world-class law firms here, not only native, but also globally based. And of course, John's company is well known in terms of IP rights, for example, which is you need that very, very much so. If you are going to be having something, it has to be like next door, there's an IP that I can go after in some fashion. But Atlanta has been surprisingly in the past a good arbitration capital. Singapore has become an arbitration capital. And we have significant number of lawyers in the city here who really are experts at arbitration. Disputes between people rather than go to the court, see if we can have a settlement or some sort of understand. I think those kinds of backbones, education is a very important backbone. Health to some extent is an important backbone, but legal services and financial services, even our banks have headquartered in North Carolina, the presence is in Atlanta. There is a Bank of America on the one hand, Wells Fargo on the other hand, Truist, for example, which is basically, but all their operations are here. So banking is important in many ways, in addition to everything else. But I tell you, it's a wide open market for private equity. Private equity, they visit here, love it actually. They like this city. There seems to be something good about the city that people like. I have never heard anybody backmouthing when they visited the city. Our convention bureau does a good job, which is not a small enterprise. I mean, they are like the, among the top 10, 11 major conventions. All the events, conferences, conventions come here. So I think we have everything going in terms of the soft power in many ways. John, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to mention that I think one of the things that sort of echoes what you both have been talking about is the recent announcement of Atlanta as one of the newest La French tech communities.
Yeah.
And you look at the landscape, the support services, large corporates, the venture funding that's here, and what is anticipated to continue to grow here and be attractive here. I think that was a good testament of Atlanta as growing as a global hub for new investment, new technology. I know we're coming up on time. Like I said earlier, I think there's so much around this topic, and Jag, I know you and John could, you could continue to dive deep in these areas. It sounds like maybe as a summary comment that There's a lot of technology threads that are moving just really across the globe. They're being accelerated by advances in digital technology and then brought together through a number of industries that Georgia and Atlanta is well positioned to be able to take advantage of these. The ingredients such as talent, development of some of these new technologies from the universities, and then commercializing those through startups and other new ventures are all part of the mix, and are all part of the mix that need to be nurtured for an area to become a global hub or maintain itself as a global hub as well. Any final thoughts, Ani, before we turn it back
Greg,
over to Ani?
I wanted
John,
to note in relation to your remark that we have the new president of French Tech Atlanta this afternoon as a speaker at 2:20.
Yeah. Well, Greg, thank you. Wonderful job. I really appreciate your comments and thoughts and vision, Dr. Shade and John. You both have been leaders in your space for last 20, 30 years. And I personally have been living in Atlanta since 1994. And I have seen the world-class recognition, in the words of John Yates, Atlanta has started taking. I have coordinated more than 50 delegations of business leaders and organizations from this area to India. And personally, I'm quite impressed with the growth we have done. We do need to focus on few areas, and perhaps cybersecurity is going to be one of them. And that leads me to our next session. John, I thank you for your time, sir. And Dr. Shade, please accept our thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to see you all. Thanks for your presentations.